Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about therapy for kids with OCD. A lot of times we think if we can just find that holy grail of the right child OCD therapist, we're good and we're done. And today I want to talk to you about how our role is crucial no matter what, which can be an empowering thing, because when you realize the impact that you have on your child's OCD, it can be really inspiring, first overwhelming, and then inspiring, because you do have a lot more control than you think. But before we get started, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the US and outside the US. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is a right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That is treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. We're talking about connecting you to resources, and NoCD is a great resource because the first step is getting an effective, qualified, educated, skilled OCD child therapist. And the second thing is knowing your role. And that part I've got your back for. The other part, I can connect you, but you have to do the rest. And it can be really tricky to find. You don't want to just go to any therapist. You really want to find one that is skilled and specialized in OCD, because most graduate programs do not teach how to treat and assess OCD. They might spend half a class talking about just the DSM and a little bit of OCD in a very stereotypical sort of way. They're not diving deep in most programs. And so those therapists have to go out and get their own training, like I did. I had to go get my own advanced training and immerse myself in the OCD world in order to get that effective consultation and training. And so that's who you're looking for. Luckily, NoCD does that. They train their staff. And so you know that when you're going to NoCD, you're getting someone who's getting that training, which is really important. But let's talk about you. You're an important part of this as well. And I'm going to talk to you about why therapy for a child with OCD isn't enough, that your role is crucial. When my son first started showing OCD symptoms, I was completely confused and overwhelmed, even though I had all the clinical skills. And I thought to myself, okay, Natasha, just get a grip. What would you do if he was your client? And sometimes when I think about my kids' struggles and I put on my clinical therapy lens, I see things more clearly. And so when I put on my therapy lens, I was like, you just need to pull him into your home office once a week for 50 minutes as if he's a client. And then do with him what you would do with a client, and he'll have the skills that the kids that you see do. The problem with that is it didn't go well, first of all. And I had been trying to connect him to an OCD therapist. I'll tell you about that in a second. But he didn't want to talk for that hour. He was like, don't pull me in here. I don't want to talk. And I was his mom, so that was a problem. But I couldn't dictate when we were going to work on it. And what I found is that he wanted help, and he wanted skills and tools in the moments when he was struggling, or those were like the learning opportunities when he wanted me to do something for his OCD, or when he was spiraling because of his OCD. Those were the moments. Or when he started to do new behaviors where I was like, oh gosh, that seems like OCD too. Or so he has a lot of co-occurring issues. So then when he started to show ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, where he started to restrict his eating, I was like, oh, this is part of it too. And I realized there was an aha moment when this happened. He was 8. So this was close to 8 years ago at this point. But I had this aha moment on a very personal level where I was like, oh my gosh, the parent is really important, which may seem so ridiculous. But honestly, I intellectually knew, yeah, you have to treat the child and the family. That's important. But I got it on a visceral level. I was like, I am more important than anything. And when I said I mean me as the parent. And it shifted the way I look at things clinically And it actually was the very beginning of me creating the AT parenting resources that I provide, because at that time I was blogging, and I had written a book, How to Parent Your Anxious Toddler, and I was creating a blog and a website for that. And it was when the wheels fell off on all three of my children around that exact same time. And so my daughter, who was 6, started to have OCD issues. My son, who was 8 at the time, started having restrictive eating and struggles and OCD. And my daughter, who was around, I don't know how old she was, I guess 14 or 15, started to develop panic attacks. So like the wheels fell off during that year. And that is really when I had that true awareness of the parent is the most important person. Therapy is a supplement, but the parent is the most important. And I realized that from my own experience was, I'm doing this 24/7. You're doing this 24/7. The therapist, typically, unless you're in intensive outpatient, is seeing your child 50 minutes a week. That's helpful if you obviously don't have the clinical skills. And it's helpful when someone is seeing someone, when someone who is not the parent is seeing your child. Just in the last few years, I finally have found a really good qualified anxiety and OCD child therapist for both my kids, different therapists, same practice. And it has been nice for me to give the baton to somebody else and just be like, you can talk to him about what he's doing. And that's nice, but that doesn't mean I get to drop the ball. I still have to do all the other stuff. I still have to keep them clued into, I'm seeing this behavior, or I'm seeing this theme, or I'm seeing this new compulsion, or this is what I'm doing. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is that your role is crucial. And I stopped pulling my son into my home office 50 minutes a week, and I started living and creating a home environment that became therapeutic. I wanted my home to be a therapeutic home environment where I didn't grow the anxiety and OCD. I knew how to respond to the anxiety and OCD, and I knew my role in how to help them. And so I want to go over that today. I first want to start off with some misconceptions of why a lot of times parents either discount their role, or they don't even feel like they have a responsibility or a role. And the first one that I see a lot is, oh my goodness, we found a good therapist, our job is done. It's kind of like your child has a heart condition and you find a good cardiologist and you're like, done. Now that's true for our cardiologists, except maybe we have to watch what they eat, or we have to do things, homework. It's not that way when it comes to mental health, and it's especially not that way when it comes to OCD. Because when it comes to OCD, I'm sorry, but our job is never done. That's so exhausting to say and hear, but it's true. And we're going to go through why that is true, but you can't just give them the baton in a full way. I mean, it felt good for me to pass my kids on and be like, now they're in therapy, that's good. But it didn't really change what I had to be doing at home. And so the reason why this misconception happens is I think that we just want the experts to handle it. But what you don't realize is that you are the expert. All you have to do is get some knowledge. That's kind of where I try to fill in the gap. And hopefully you're getting that from my podcast. And hopefully for some of you, you've taken my course, How to Teach Kids to Crush OCD, so that you are learning your own skills in how to understand OCD. That's our job, is to, one, fully understand it. We just opened our doors in the AT parenting community last week. You're going to be listening to this. I am way ahead. You should be so impressed with me. I am recording this May 19th, and this is not coming out until June 24th. So that's pretty impressive that I am like 6 episodes ahead, but that's a yay me thing. You don't care. But my point is, we did open the AT parenting community. It is closed now as you're listening to this, but we do have a growing wait list. It's already growing, and I am recording this over a month ago from where you are. So when it busts out of its seams, I don't think that's the right phrase. It's busting out of its seams. We do open it only to the wait list. We do not advertise that. I won't tell the podcast listeners about it. My email news, if you're on my newsletter email list, you won't hear about it. If you want to be on my newsletter, I never tell you how to get on my newsletter, but you can go to natashadaniels.com/newsletter. I should probably tell people that more often. But it's private. We don't tell anybody. The only people we tell are the people that are literally on the wait list. We only email them. It's a very short list compared to my big email list. And so if you're not on the wait list for this particular period of time, because if you join my wait list, a few months ago, you're not going to be contacted because we've already opened it and closed it since then. And so you don't count. You have to be fresh on the wait list. So go to atparentingcommunity.com and add your name to the wait list if you are not in the community and you want to be in the community, because my guess is, based on the time that this is going to be released, we're probably going to open it very soon. But you won't know about it unless you're on there. And we're going to talk about how the community helps people develop this therapeutic home environment that is so important. And that is what I realized with my son is I need to create this home environment where I am developing a system in our house of how we talk to OCD and anxiety, how we work on it as a family. And that has been really helpful. And that is what I started to create back when he was 8. When I had that epiphany, I was like, oh my gosh, parents need help. There was like this new passion of, if I feel this way, and I'm an anxiety and OCD child therapist expert, well, with air tags. What's an air tags? Air quotes. I don't know what's wrong with my brain today. But if I have all this expertise and all this training, imagine what a parent who doesn't have that would feel like. And so I started the courses, I started the podcast, then I started courses, and then I started the AT Parenting Community, where I work with you directly and other parents support you. And it's a whole beautiful thing that you can check out at atparentingcommunity.com. But that's where that started. It actually started from my own struggle and my own realization. Intellectually, I always knew it as a therapist, but I had to have my own experience of, oh my gosh, this is hard. Who's supposed to help these parents? Because most of the time the therapist isn't meeting with you, they're meeting with your child. And so now that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help you, and I'm trying to help you see that you have a front row seat to your child's OCD themes. You have a front row seat to how much they're struggling. A lot of times they go into therapy and they sugarcoat it. And I've seen that as a therapist myself. Kids will come in and I'm like, hey, how's it going? How's the OCD? Oh, I'm doing really good. I'm not really doing any compulsions. And then the parent will email me after the session and be like, it's been a really rough week. I hope you really helped him. And I'm like, I wish you had emailed me before, because he said it was going great. And he kind of looked like he was being honest. I didn't get that he was not being honest. Sometimes I could tell. But the therapist only knows what the child is telling them, or what they're willing to share. A lot of times they'll hide their compulsions, and they can't hide it 24/7. So you'll notice them doing things, even if they're not communicating and telling you directly, this is a compulsion, or even involving you in the compulsion. You're going to see some repetitive, quirky behavior that looks like OCD. And that information and that seat that you have, that front row seat, is crucial in helping a child with OCD. So we're going to talk about how you can help them. First, I have to convince you that you have to. So take it one step at a time. It's not like you have to go back to graduate school or to graduate school and know this stuff. It actually is pretty simple once you learn it. My course is less than 3 hours. And once you take it, you know more than the average mental health provider who doesn't specialize in OCD. That's scary, right? That's pretty scary. But we want to help our kids in certain ways. And so OCD needs more than 1 hour a week. It needs observation. It needs interaction on a daily basis, if not hourly basis. So we are the frontline responders, and we also are often involved in OCD. And so not only are we there to be detective, to be the observer, to be the objective historian of what's happening with their OCD, we're more than that. We're not just supportive. We are hooked into OCD. And so we become complicit in growing OCD, because OCD wants to involve the people around them. OCD is not only bossy to the person who has it, it can be bossy to to the entire household. And if you don't understand that and you don't know your role in that, you're going to inadvertently grow OCD. And so this can be really hard too. I did a TikTok the other day, and it was like a really fast video. And all I said was something like, the most powerful thing you can say. Let me see. I don't remember what I said. I had to pull it up. I wrote, this one sentence helped me stop feeding my child's OCD. And I don't remember the sentence. And you're like, what was it? It was something like, I love you too much to not grow your OCD. A very simple, supportive statement, not growing the child's OCD. That wasn't a really controversial thing to say. At least if you've listened to my podcast for any significant amount of time, or have taken any of my courses, or especially if you're in the AT parenting community, that would not rock your world, that sentence or that reel. You'd be like, yeah, of course, that's, we don't reassure OCD. But the average person doesn't know that. And, I got some nasty comments on there. One person was like, I disagree. Another person was like, I'd like to see some peer-reviewed research on that. Oh my gosh, do you know how much research there is on family accommodation growing the acuity of OCD? I mean, I just linked one research study. I try not to argue with people on social media, but I was actually really surprised at the reaction on TikTok. Now, it's interesting because I post that on Instagram, and I have a lot more followers on Instagram, and I feel like they're more educated, like, because they're following me or they're consuming more information. I have no idea, but there was no comments like that on Instagram. It's interesting how different platforms bring and attract different people. And it just reminded me that people don't know this. This isn't intuitive. Like, you have to be taught this in order to understand that. So when we offer compulsive reassurance, and that's different than reassurance. It's different than saying, I am so sorry this is hard for you. Or I know this is hard and we're going to get through it. We're going to work on this together, or we're going to get you the right kind of help. Like, that's reassurance, but it's not growing OCD. But when you say, yes, you've washed your hands 5 times, they look clean to me. Or yes, there's no spots in that food, you can eat that now. Or when you say, yeah, cursing in your head doesn't make you a bad person, you're not going to go to hell. And when we get on these loops, because it's not one and done, a lot of times the more you respond and the more you compulsively reassure OCD, not even your child, OCD, the bigger it grows. So we need to learn that as a parent. To create a therapeutic home environment, I need to know what is validation of their struggles, reassurance of their struggles, and reassurance to OCD, enabling OCD, growing the neural pathways literally in their brain that create more OCD thoughts and feelings. We don't want to do that.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do like the exposures. Before it was like really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com. We also want to learn about accommodating rituals. If I am providing endless amounts of toilet paper and endless amounts of soap, and I don't know how to cut back in a therapeutic way, I'm like a drug dealer and I'm fueling the OCD. I am supplying OCD. I'm OCD's supplier, and we don't want that. It doesn't happen overnight. There are methods that you can slowly and systematically pull back your involvement with OCD. So it's not like a Band-Aid that you rip off. It didn't happen overnight. You're not going to stop overnight. But even to know and have the wherewithal that I need to stop doing this over time, even if my child is really angry with me, that's my job. That's my responsibility. It's what I often say is it's the first layer of the onion, and it's the easiest to peel. It's the hardest. It'll make us cry, literally, but it is the first layer of the onion. The deeper layers of the onion are them doing their own work. We don't get to control that. They can do compulsions all day long that don't involve us and that we're not supplying, and we can't control that. That's their part, but I can control what I'm supplying, and I can control what I'm contributing. And so I want to know what that is. The other thing is I want to know what they're avoiding, and understand that avoidance is a compulsion too. So when they say, can you open the door for me? Can you, I don't want to sit to the left, I want to sit to the right. And can you touch my laundry because I can't touch it? And when we accommodate the avoidance, that also grows the OCD. And so it comes from a loving place, but we don't always know that we're growing the OCD. And sometimes we do know that we're growing it, but we don't know how to stop in a way that's not going to throw them off a cliff. So understanding and learning what's my role in my child, teen, or young adult's OCD, and how do I slowly and systematically pull back the enabling of OCD so I don't make it worse inadvertently. That's an important. The next thing that I want to talk about is learning how to spot those compulsions and learning how to teach exposure response prevention, which is the go-to therapeutic approach for OCD, especially pediatric OCD. I want to understand what it is. I want to understand what they're doing in therapy, if they're in therapy, and I want to know what should I do to support them doing ERP, exposure response prevention exercises at home. OCD is a very skill-based therapy approach. It's not lay on the couch and tell me about your feelings. It's not lay on the couch, let's talk about the trauma that caused you to think you're a bad person, that caused your moral OCD. That's not how it works. OCD is a very biological, highly genetic disorder, and there's a very systematic approach to dealing with OCD. And the first go-to approach is ERP, exposure response prevention. And that's not laying on the couch doing talk therapy. That is doing exercises where you purposely, systematically, slowly trigger the exposure, the trigger to the OCD without them doing the compulsion. That's the RP, the response prevention, is we're going to trigger your OCD, and we do this collaboratively. This isn't done to a person. This is done with a person, with their permission, in very, very small systematic steps. And then they don't do the compulsion. So maybe they don't wash, or they don't get that reassurance, whatever it is that they need, they don't get. That's what ERP is. And it's not something that you want the therapist just doing behind closed doors, and you have no clue what they're doing, what they're working on, what their exposures are, what should their homework be. And a lot of times, and especially in other countries, I find, in Canada, in Australia, sometimes in the UK, they don't involve the parents as much as they do in the United States. You might even have experienced that in the United States, but I find it, I've got a global community in the AT parenting community, and I see a disproportionate amount of communication breakdowns, specifically in Australia, Canada, and the UK. And I think that has to do more with confidentiality laws around therapy versus the United States. I don't know. Our hands are not as tied. I can talk to a parent because they're a minor. And so it depends on the rules. But I do notice that parents are really in the dark more often when they're seeing therapists in those countries. Not always, but a lot of the time. So you have to be more of an advocate, and you have to communicate with the therapist and say, I want to know what exposures you're doing. How often should they be doing exposures at home? That's not confidential. Like, that's just like the nature of therapy. And so that can be really helpful. We want to be clued into that and know what our role is. Should we be systematically pulling back our enabling of certain things? Should I be learning to spot different compulsions? The answer is yes. Regardless of what a therapist tells you, you should absolutely be keeping an eye out for new compulsions. You don't want to be the OCD police and be like, is that your OCD? Was that a compulsion? I don't like direct questions. I think it's better to say to your child, I noticed that lately you seem to be tapping the door 3 times before you leave the house, and I wonder if your OCD is bothering you. That's a much less direct, confrontational question than saying, I noticed and I wonder. Softening your language can be really helpful. We talk a lot about that in the AT parenting community, is the right communication to build that trust and to build that openness. Our language can do, it can shut kids down or it can open them up. And we have to learn that. As part of a therapeutic home environment, we have to learn, what language do I use with my child? How do I discover their core fear? Because a lot of times they won't be doing that in therapy. A lot of members in the AT parenting community will talk about the importance of knowing the OCD theme and knowing the core fear just to craft a really effective exposure, or seeing, wow, they have this core fear that carries through like 3 or 4 different OCD themes, or even jumps over to anxiety as well. You can have one core fear, and you can have social anxiety related to that core fear, moral OCD related to that core fear, contamination OCD related to that core fear, but I can target that core fear and make a lot more progress. When I talk like that, some members of the community are like, what's a core fear? And the therapist isn't working on a core fear. Not every therapist, even trained OCD therapist, will be targeting the core fear. That doesn't mean that you can't do that yourself and do some work at home to supplement the therapy. That can be very, very helpful. You have a front row seat. And so I know when I look at my kids, I can clearly start seeing core fears because I'm with them all the time. And I'm like, I'll give you an example. My son, when he was little, had a lot of random phobic behavior. He was terrified of needles, so he didn't want to get shots. He was terrified of bugs, but if you really dive deep and said, what kind of bugs? What scares you the most about bugs? He'll say, I don't want to get stung. And then you talk about what bugs are the scariest, and it would be like bees and scorpions, the ones with stingers. So he didn't want to get stung. And then he had a thing about cacti. We live in Arizona, so we have a lot of scorpions, we have a lot of cacti. And if he saw a cactus, like let's say we were in a shopping center and there's cacti everywhere. You live in Arizona, you know it's cacti, not cactus. You gotta speak the cacti. He would walk like all the way around and avoid the cactus. And when I explored that with him, he'd say, I don't want to get poked. They have sharp things on them. At night, he would lift up his blanket and he would cover his neck. And when you talked to him about it, he'd say, I'm afraid a killer's going to come in, break in the house, and they're going to cut me in my neck. He also had this thing where he was really worried about people poking his belly button. Okay, that all seems really random, right? You might be like, oh my gosh, this kid is like phobic of everything. And some of it was more OCD related. There were a lot of like compulsions around it, and some of it was just very phobic. But when you look at all of those things, all of them involved getting poked. The needles getting poked, the cacti getting poked, somebody poking his belly button, someone poking his neck. What was the other one that I mentioned? Oh, the bugs getting stung, getting poked. And we did exposures around him literally getting poked, which I won't go into, but he agreed and we did them together. But when we targeted being poked, the idea, and when I was able to even talk to him and say, your core fear, it seems like you're really afraid of being poked, whether it's with a bee sting or with a needle or with a cactus, you're really afraid of getting poked. And he's like, yeah, I don't want to get poked. And so we had one core fear for all of those behaviors. So when we targeted that core fear, we were able to make more progress, and all of those improved in one fell swoop. That's what I teach. And sometimes it's hard to find. And a lot of times therapists aren't doing that work, that they are just doing ERP or they're just doing talk therapy. And so we can see that. I can say, like, I notice when he's crossing the street when I see a cactus. I notice that he's holding his shirt down because he doesn't want me to poke his belly, which seems illogical and irrational. You will notice things. You will notice things way, way before a therapist will ever, if ever, is privy to that information, because it's like telephone. It has to happen, and then your child has to be willing to talk to the therapist about it. The therapist has to be willing to recognize it as an OCD or anxiety thing, and then it gets treated. That's a lot of barriers where you are right there, front row. You can see it. You just have to get your education, and so that you're able to know what you're looking at. So the idea is that you don't want to replace the therapist. I love that my kids have a therapist. I love that they have a safe place to go talk about their issues, especially as they get older. I love that someone else is doing exposures with them and talking to them about doing the things that when I tell them to do it, they don't do. But I'm also keenly aware of my important role of watching at how many calories my son is taking, watching how often he eats, because he's not a good historian. When he's talking about restrictive eating with his therapist, he will minimize it. My daughter just recently got, like, for a day, she started doing this new compulsion, which was totally out of the blue. And it was a very, very old theme, but a new compulsion. And within that hour, we identified it as a compulsion. And I told her that I recognized it as a compulsion, and I haven't seen her do it since then. That's ripping a baby weed out from the dirt before it even has the time or strength to grow any roots. That's your job. That's your role. And my role is to help you with that. So hopefully this podcast in general has been helping you get educated and learn and spot the things that I'm talking about, because it's not rocket science. It's just things that are counterintuitive some of the time. If you want more in-depth support, get on the waitlist for the AT Parenting community. In the AT Parenting community, you will get access to most of my online courses. So you'll get access to how to teach kids to crush OCD. I tell parents, take that. I can tell when you haven't taken it. When you come in, because they can private message me. So they come in, we have an app, and they can private message me. And so we're having conversations. We can have conversations back and forth all day long. And I'll say, you didn't take the course, I could tell. I'll say it in a nicer way, but I'll just be like, if you have the bandwidth and you have 3 hours over the next 2 weeks, please just take the course and then circle back and talk to me, and we can have a much more advanced discussion on how you can help your child in depth. But you have to have the basic education first. We also do weekly live classes. They have access to a whole library of classes. They have access to me, like I said, one-on-one, but they also have access to each other. And it's something very validating to be like, oh my gosh, does anyone else feel this way? Or has anyone else's child done this? And more often than not, everybody's like, yes, seen that before. So I would love to have you in there. I'd love to get to know you. Get on that wait list, because like I said, if it's already been 6 weeks since I've recorded this, and we're already pretty big on the wait list now. And we just closed our doors to the AT Parenting community 4 days ago, and we already have a wait list. And so anybody can join. It's not like we have a cap on how many people can join. We have a wait list because we closed the doors because I am flooded with people asking me questions all day long. And so it is just easier for me to not have new members coming in all of the time. I start to get to know people. I start to give them like little assignments, like go take this course or go listen to this podcast and then come back and talk to me, go talk to your child about this. And so it starts to feel less overwhelming for me the longer members have been in there. And so I'm very busy right now, but in a few weeks, it'll start to slow down as people start to become more educated and start to practice the things that I'm teaching them. And then we open it up again so that I have the bandwidth and the energy to be bombarded by questions again. So that's why we have a wait list, not because we have a cap on how many families we can help. We have normally about 1,000 members at any given time, sometimes a little bit under, sometimes a little bit over, but we have solidly about 1,000 members in there, always supporting each other. And I would love for you to be part of that. So go to atparentingcommunity.com, get on that wait list, and maybe I'll be talking to you in the next couple of days. And if you're enjoying this podcast and you're like, Natasha, I'm getting so much education just from this podcast, couldn't even imagine what I would get from a community. Don't forget to leave a review, hit a star. I greatly appreciate when people leave reviews. And to show my appreciation, I always read one when I see a new one pop up. And I just checked. I didn't see any new reviews, but I'm using an app that may not always be accurate. But if you leave a review, I'll be reading yours next time. Don't forget to find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.